All right, mate, settle in, because what we're about to go through is the part of the Samantha Murphy case that almost everyone gets wrong. People talk about the search, they talk about the phone, they talk about the arrest, but very few people really sit down and walk through the most important window of all, the first 72 hours. Not the headlines, not the cleaned-up public timeline, the real one. The messy one, the one where every decision matters, every assumption matters, and where the smallest oversight can change the entire direction of a case. Before we start, let me ask you something. When you first heard about Samantha going missing, did you imagine that the first 3 days went smoothly? Did you think it was well organized, well understood, well coordinated? Or were you one of the people who felt, even back then, that something was off? Because the more you break down those 72 hours, the more questions appear. And I want you to notice those questions with me and tell me in the comments where you think the first cracks really showed. Let's rewind. Sunday morning, February 4th, Ballarat East. It's early, quiet, nothing unusual. Samantha heads out for a run, something she's done so many times. Routine, and that matters because routines give investigators a starting point, predictability, a frame. When someone breaks routine without explanation, something serious has happened. But here's the first detail most people gloss over. The last confirmed moment we have of Samantha isn't in a forest. It isn't on a track. It isn't near a trailhead. It's at the house, the very start of the run. After that, nothing is confirmed. Everything becomes assumption. Let me ask you a simple question. How many cases have you followed where the last confirmed sighting turns out to be the most important detail in the entire disappearance? Quite a few, right? So why does nearly everyone talk about the running route as if it were confirmed? It wasn't. But let's stay inside those first few hours. Samantha doesn't come home. The family tries to reach her. No answer. The hours drag on, and this is the moment many families face in missing person cases, the awful uncertainty. Is she just late? Did something small happen? Is this serious? Should we worry? Should we wait? Should we call someone? By the time police are contacted, it's already clear that something isn't right. And this is where the first real decision happens behind the scenes. A decision that hardly anyone talks about. Did police treat this as a suspicious disappearance from the beginning? Or did they treat it as a lost runner situation? Everything we've seen publicly suggests they chose the non-suspicious lane, and that choice set the tone for the first 72 hours. Now, was that a reasonable decision, or was it a dangerous assumption? Tell me what you think, because I've looked at dozens of cases, and the starting assumption can make or break the early investigation. Let's move into the next phase. The search begins. SES volunteers, police, drones, helicopters, dogs, ground crews, all the right optics. It looks big, it looks thorough. But I want you to really think about what they were searching for, because if their assumption was she's a runner who got lost or collapsed, then their entire focus would be bushland, tracks, gullies, slopes, bush edges. And that's exactly where they looked. But here's where the case starts feeling wrong, even in those early hours. They don't find anything, not one meaningful trace, not one item, not one disturbed patch of ground, not one sign that Samantha ever entered those tracks. Have you ever seen a major bush search produce absolutely nothing? Because I haven't. Even in the toughest terrain, searchers usually find something, a footprint, a broken twig, a scent trail, a dropped object. A direction of travel, something. Here, the silence was loud. Tell me this. If you were leading that search and every location you expected to find evidence in turned up spotless, how long would it take for doubt to creep in? 12 hours, 24, a day and a half. The first 72 hours are supposed to narrow possibilities. Here they created more. Let's talk about the phone. The infamous Buninyong Tower interaction. People throw around the word ping like it's a GPS pin. It's not. It's a handshake, a moment of communication. It doesn't tell you where someone is. It tells you which tower their phone connected to. Do you know how far a phone can be from a tower? Do you know how many variables affect the connection? Terrain, height, congestion, reflection, weather. That Buninyong interaction did one thing and one thing only. It introduced doubt into the lost runner model. If Samantha was injured near home, why would her phone be interacting with a distant tower? Was it because the phone moved? Was it because the tower reached into the area? Was it noise? Was it signal drift? If you were in charge, what would you make of that? Would you immediately pivot the search south? Or would you hold on to the familiar theory a little longer because it feels easier? People forget this part. Police didn't immediately shift everything to Buninyong. They kept the search grounded around Ballarat East. They stuck with the original assumption. And in the meantime, crucial hours were ticking away. Ask yourself this. If the phone ping had happened near a completely different direction, say north, not south, would the search have changed? Or would it still have taken time for the old theory to break down? This is the reality in missing person cases. The evidence you want is hardly ever the evidence you get, and the evidence you get rarely fits neatly into the story you've already built. Let's walk into hour 12. The search is still full force, volunteers everywhere, helicopter in the sky, SES combing grid after grid, but still nothing. Hour 24, and this is where the tension usually rises in properly handled cases. You start asking new questions, you start widening your scope, you start re-evaluating assumptions. Did someone see her leave? Did CCTV catch anything? Did any neighbors hear something? Is there any reason to believe she went running at all? But what do we see publicly at this point? The language is still soft. We have no reason to believe it's suspicious. We're continuing the search. Notice the optimism. Notice the confidence in the lost runner assumption. But is optimism the right emotion after 24 hours of searching with no results? If you were standing in that command center looking at a big map full of empty search grids, would you still believe the simplest explanation? Or would you be thinking, this isn't behaving like a bush disappearance at all? Let's move into hour 36. Dawn again. Another day of searching. More SES, more volunteers, and still nothing. How many times have you heard of someone collapsing or twisting an ankle in a familiar bushland area and leaving absolutely no trace? Very few. At this point, I want to ask you something directly. If you were a detective watching this unfold, wouldn't your suspicion start rising sharply right around here, or would you still be holding on to the idea of an accident simply because it feels more comfortable? Hour 48. The search widens. New zones. New areas. They start moving outwards. And that right there is the first big behavioral clue. When a search expands instead of tightening, it's because the original theory isn't producing results. Is that when police started thinking differently? Or do you think they still believed she was just somewhere in the bush? Because expanding doesn't signal confidence. It signals uncertainty. And what happens next is even more telling. Around this time, you feel a shift, not a public one, not a dramatic one, a quiet one. The tone from police becomes less optimistic. The language starts losing hope words. They aren't saying "not suspicious" as loudly anymore. They're gathering more digital evidence. They're talking to more people around Samantha. They're looking at timelines more carefully. Isn't it interesting how no one in the public really talked about this shift at the time? Was it because it was subtle, or because we all wanted to believe she was still alive? By hour 60, searches are still ongoing, but the energy has changed. The idea that she might be alive is slowly draining from the language. And if you look closely at these cases, you'll notice police stop using certain phrases once suspicion rises. We're hopeful. We believe she may be in this area. Those words disappear. What replaces them? Silence. caution, control. Ask yourself this. If police truly believed a person was lost near their usual running route, would they ever scale down that area this early? Would they move on? Would they widen the area instead of tightening it? Or does widening tell you something? Does it tell you police are looking for something other than a fallen runner? Our 72, 3 full days, no trace, no witness, no camera, no scent trail, no sign of movement inside the bushland, nothing. At what point does absence become evidence? Because that's what happened here. The absence of typical lost runner indicators started to point toward a completely different kind of case. And that's where the internal shift happens, where the model breaks, where someone behind the scenes looks at the evidence and says, this doesn't behave like a search and rescue anymore. And of course, we know what came later. The missing persons squad taking a bigger role, the search shifting further south, the tone shifting, and eventually March comes. The arrest happens, charges are laid, and the case fully transitions from search to homicide. But none of that is the important part. What matters, and what very few people see, is that the change didn't happen in March. It didn't happen weeks later. It didn't happen at a press conference. It happened in those first 72 hours. So now I want to hear from you. When did you feel the shift? Was it the lack of evidence? Was it the phone interaction? Was it the relocation of the search area, the tone of the police updates, the silence? Or maybe it was something in the logic of the timeline that didn't sit right with you from the beginning. Tell me in the comments what your turning point was. All right, mate? Tell me your thoughts below, and I'll see you in the next one.